She didn't say a word. She barely glanced at him. And yet, in those first 10 seconds, she'd already made up her mind. Most men spend years, sometimes decades, trying to impress women with what they say. The right compliment, the right joke, the right story. But here's what almost nobody tells you. Women aren't judging what you say first. They're running a silent test before you ever open your mouth, and most men fail it without even knowing it existed. Today, I want to talk about that test, what it is, why women run it, and what the men who pass it understand about themselves that most men simply don't. Let me paint you a picture. You walk into a room, a dinner party, a social gathering, maybe a casual event with people you half know. There's a woman across the room, composed, attractive, confident in herself. You make eye contact for a moment, you smile. You think, okay, I'll go say hello. And somewhere between walking toward her and saying your first sentence, something shifts. She becomes a little cooler, a little more distant, polite, but closed. You wonder what you did wrong. You replay the conversation. You didn't say anything offensive. You weren't rude, you were perfectly fine. And that's exactly the problem. Fine doesn't pass the test. Fine is invisible. And invisible men don't hold a woman's attention. This has happened to almost every man at some point in his life. Most chalk it up to bad luck or poor chemistry or the assumption that she just wasn't interested. But the truth is far more subtle than that. Women, and I mean this without judgment, because it's deeply wired, are extraordinarily attuned to signals of inner state. Not your bank account, not your height, not even your looks, at least not first. They're reading your energy. Psychologists call it emotional attunement, the ability to detect another person's internal emotional state through subtle, nonverbal cues. Women tend to be exceptionally good at this. In the span of seconds, she registers. How are you standing? How are you breathing? Are your eyes scanning the room anxiously, or are you settled, still, present? She notices whether you approached her because you were drawn to her or because you needed something from her, even if you don't realize there's a difference. One is masculine, one is needy, and she feels the difference before she hears a single word from you. This is the silent test. It has nothing to do with what you say. It has everything to do with who you are before the conversation starts. Let me tell you about two men. Call them Robert and David. Both are in their early 60s. Both are at the same evening gathering. Both notice the same woman, Margaret, a sharp, elegant woman in her late 50s. Robert walks over quickly. He's had a glass of wine. He's rehearsed something clever to say. His eyes are slightly wide, checking her reaction before he's even spoken. He leans in just a touch too close and says, "You know, I was watching you from across the room and I just had to come introduce myself." Margaret smiles politely. Her shoulders stay turned slightly away. She answers his questions briefly. After 90 seconds, she finds a reason to excuse herself. Robert can't figure out what went wrong. The line worked before. He was friendly, he was complimentary. Now David. He's standing near the window, relaxed. He's not scanning the room for validation. He's simply there. When Margaret moves near him, their eyes meet naturally. He doesn't rush to speak. He holds her gaze for one calm beat. Then he says simply, "Good evening." And he says it like a man who doesn't need her to respond well. Margaret pauses. Something about him makes her curious. "Good evening" was 3 syllables, but it told her something that Robert's entire performance failed to communicate. This man is at peace with himself. They talked for 40 minutes. What did David have that Robert didn't? It wasn't better lines. It wasn't more experience with women. It wasn't a better haircut. It was groundedness. Groundedness is hard to fake and impossible to manufacture in the moment. It comes from a man who has made peace with who he is. A man who doesn't walk into a room needing it to go a certain way. A man whose self-worth isn't riding on whether a woman smiles back at him. Emotionally intelligent men understand something crucial. Women are not a prize to be won through performance. They are perceptive human beings who respond, deeply and instinctively, to authentic masculine presence. When you approach a woman hoping she'll approve of you, she feels it as pressure, subtle maybe, but it's there. When you approach her from a place of genuine ease, curious about her but unattached to the outcome, she feels something entirely different. She feels safe, and feeling safe around a man, truly, emotionally safe, is one of the most attractive things a woman can experience. But here's where most men get it wrong. They hear this kind of insight and they try to perform groundedness. They practice not caring. They put on a cool, distant mask. They think detachment is the answer. It isn't. There is a profound difference between a man who is emotionally unavailable and a man who is emotionally self-sufficient. The emotionally unavailable man is distant because he's afraid. He's protecting himself. Women sense the wall and they know something is hidden behind it. The emotionally self-sufficient man is warm, present, and genuinely engaged, but he isn't desperate for any particular outcome. He's interested in her as a person, not hunting for her approval. And this is the part nobody talks about. The silent test isn't just about confidence. It's about whether you know yourself. Women, particularly women with their own maturity and life experience, aren't looking for a man who has everything figured out. They're looking for a man who has figured out himself. There is no performance more magnetic than a man who is simply, completely at home in his own skin. Here's the deeper psychological pattern underneath all of this. Women have always been, throughout history, extraordinarily good at reading men. In environments far more dangerous than a dinner party, the ability to quickly assess a man's true character, not his stated character, was essential. That instinct hasn't disappeared. It's just operating in a different context now. When she seems cool or distant after a brief meeting, she's not being unkind. She's often responding to an incongruity she sensed between how you presented yourself and who you actually are beneath the surface. Most men, especially men who came of age in an era that didn't encourage emotional self-awareness, have a gap between their outer presentation and their inner life. They perform confidence without embodying it. They perform calm without feeling it. And women, often without being able to articulate exactly why, sense that gap. What most men fail to realize is, the work of becoming attractive to a high-quality woman isn't external work. It's internal work. It's the work of a man who has faced his own fears honestly, who has stopped blaming the world or his past for where he is, who has built a life he can stand behind, not to impress others, but because it reflects his own values. That man walks differently. He speaks differently. He listens differently. And women feel it. You don't have to announce that you're confident. A grounded man never needs to. His presence speaks first, and it speaks clearly. I want to leave you with something I've come to believe more and more as I've gotten older. The men who understand women the deepest aren't the ones who studied tactics. They're not the ones who memorized the right things to say or the perfect way to act. They're the men who turned inward, who asked themselves honest questions and sat with uncomfortable answers, who did the quiet work of becoming whole. A woman doesn't fall for the version of you that you perform for her. She falls, if she falls, for the version of you that exists when there's nothing at stake. When you're not trying, when you're just you. And here is what I believe with everything I've observed and everything I've lived. The most powerful thing a man over 50 can offer a woman isn't his money, his status, or even his experience. It's his settled, unshakable sense of self. Because that is rarer than almost anything else in this world. Men spend their 20s and 30s building their outer world, their careers, their families, their identities. The gift of this stage of life, and it truly is a gift, is the chance to build your inner world, to become the kind of man who walks into a room and doesn't need anything from it, who sees a woman and is genuinely curious about her as a human being, not just as a prize. When you become that man, you stop failing the silent test, because you stop taking it. You become the test.